Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout out to something else. Something else, Daddy.
This is Nicole Matala, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Arya.
And welcome to episode number 230 of Something Else. Feast your ear holes on this week's episode as we take a look at NWA Total Nonstop Action, episode number 64 from September 24th, 2003. My name is Arya, and joining me, as always, is the Sinn to my Julio Dinero. It's Cyndi. Cyndi, are you feeling unseen today?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, Julio Dinero and Sinn were in the finish of the main event, and it was unseen.
Yeah, God. We're going to have a discussion about the ending of this week's show when we get to it. You know that streak we had of decent shows that we've had?
Yes, I recall it was about 2 months of, as I quoted it, not bad shows.
Well, guess what? That streak has ended tonight.
Oh, that streak was pretty much over last week. We just let it go for a little bit. I'll just say it right now. My notes for the end of the show. Um, let's see here. All the goodwill TNA had with the Super X Cup, along with 2 months of mostly not bad shows, is pretty much gone.
Yep.
Now, keep in mind, as we get into this, there have been worse shows. Like, like this is a bad show. The problem with this show is that we just had 2 months, like I said, of mostly not bad shows. So this was going in the wrong direction, way in the wrong direction. Well, now, Cindy, you might recall last week I broke the news that Dutch Mantel had accepted the position of new booker of TNA. And you might be wondering what the hell happened to that. Well, you see, the problem is Dutch is not Vince Russo in many, many different ways. And in this instance, it's because he did not just want to come in and have no knowledge of the product, because until last week, the only show he'd ever seen was the Super X Cup, which, as we can agree, is not standard operating TNA procedure. So he wanted to wait a couple weeks to watch the show, get a feeling of everything, and then dive into it. Hence how we still have good old Vinny Rue here, running the world and probably getting more and more pissy because of it. In fact, you could even argue that last week's stupid little silly little storyline with him and Roddy Piper, that TNA had to choose between one of those two, was more of an inside jab because, he wanted TNA to choose between him and Dutch. And we're going to find out very shortly that they chose Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make Vince Russo Roddy Piper?
Wait 3 weeks.
I don't think I've ever insulted Vince Russo so much in my life than to call him Roddy Piper in this situation.
Yikes.
'Cause
Another thing is, it's the way that Dutch Mantel books compared to what Vince Russo books is going to be quite apparent come November and December.
Are they going to start chanting Fire Dutch in the Impact Zone?
If I remember watching it correctly, you wish they would chant something.
Well, we'll get to it this week, but it's not like, they reacted huge to a professional wrestling match on this show. Um, all right. So, by the way, the other thing is, Juventud Guerrero was originally scheduled to win the X Division match that's happening on this show. However, and this is going to be one of those things that pop up in TNA a lot, he has visa issues because TNA, to save some money, doesn't want to pay for the proper paperwork. And so Hoovy is crossing the border using a tourist visa instead of a working visa. And the problem is, the people doing the whatchamacallit, the immigration, are wrestling fans, so they know who he is. And B, he is bringing his gear with him, which is tipping them off as to he's not just here to tour the U.S. And so he has been informed that if he tries to do this again without the proper paperwork, he's going to be banned from entering the country. And so they're saying Scott D'Amore is working on the paperwork currently, and it is said to take between 1 to 3 months to complete. So, yes.
Great.
All right.
Just that, I think that makes it just time for the World X Cup at least.
Well, isn't he a part of the World X Cup?
Yeah, I think so.
At least the first. Yeah, so there you go. All right. So after the last week on TNA video package, the show starts with a segment from earlier today where Eric Watts was yelling at Don Callis outside, and both the red shirts and the black shirts are there to keep them apart. We finally get, informed what the difference is between these two storyline authority figures. Callis informs us that Watts is in charge of everything that happens inside the wrestling ring, and Callis is in charge of everything else. Now, with that said, how would that really work? Because let's say Eric Watts wants to book Jeff Jarrett in a world title match, and Don Callis does not want Jeff Jarrett to be in a world title match. Couldn't Don Callis then just fire Jeff Jarrett, and thus Jeff Jarrett cannot get a world title match?
I essentially think that's what he was going to do. Spoiler.
Wow, you're
earlier.
Spoiling a segment for 10 minutes from now.
Yeah. I think that's what he was trying to do later on tonight. But to be perfectly honest, this is convoluted and complicated, and it leads to something worse.
Wait, you're saying TNA does something convoluted? The hell you say?
Yeah.
Well, from here we get the TNA intro, and the Three Live Crew are out to sing their song. If you recall, last week they said they were gonna debut their new single, and they did. It's the Three Live Crew theme song that you'll hear every week for like the next 3 years until they break up. And then they were attacked by Glenn Gilberti's group. And remember last week when Eric Young came out and Eric Young debuted and his graphics said David Young and we had a chuckle at that?
Yep.
I thought that Tenay and West fucked up again because they started yelling how David Young was out there. And I'm like, David Young and Johnny Swinger look nothing alike. But sure enough, it was in fact David Young. And the reason why David Young is here is because Johnny Swinger had an emergency appendectomy, a shoot emergency appendectomy. And so they went and found, quote unquote, tag team specialist David Young to take his place. So Glenn Gilberti, Simon Diamond, and David Young beat up the Three Live Crew, throw them off of the 2-foot high ramp, and they storm to the ring, where Glenn Gilberti announces that there will not be a title match tonight. And that's when the gathering runs in, because we can't just have a segment where one thing happens and we move on with our lives. This segment, which began with the Three Live Crew, now continues with Raven dropping Glenn Gilberti with a DDT and the heels bail. Now, Raven shows that his hair grows faster than Kurt Angle's because after a week, Raven's hair is already starting to grow in. He announces that he is embarrassed because hair versus hair is one of the few stipulations in wrestling with real consequences. I note that I thought Raven actually looks better with little hair than he did with the long hair. that he's always had. And at this point, the scarring is either minimal or his hair actually hides it. Raven
I was going
announces
to
that
go with the hair actually hides it.
Raven announces that his mental health issues are why he's not popular in the locker room. And I gotta tell you, it's very ableist of the TNA locker room that somebody has mental health issues and they are, pushing him away because of it. Jeesh, maybe Raven would be all of their besties if they didn't push him away due to his mental health issues.
Well,
Anyway,
that's Southern wrestling for you.
Raven vows to give everybody a DDT, which is a nice way to end the Three Live Crew segment. So, thoughts on this opening segment and promo?
Okay. The song was good. I mean, it's a good intro track. I was initially confused about David Young, but I was like, fine, whatever. I know you can't get a lot of people because they're either cost too much or they're too far away to make the travel worth it. Trying to think of who else could have possibly teamed up with Simon Diamond who wasn't doing anything else this week, and I couldn't. And David Young's a heel already because of his former pairing with Sonny Siaki. Gilberti getting dropped on his head is perfectly fine by me. I mean, if we have Raven just do that once a week on a show, I'd pay $10 to see that.
It's possible TNA would still be owned by Dixie Carter if Raven was giving Disco Inferno a DDT every week on TV.
Okay, scratch that. Never mind. And the promo of Raven was pretty good. You want to know why it was pretty good?
I
It
don't
was
know. Why
clear.
do you think it was pretty good?
It actually told a decent story without being meandering like most of his promos. So
Okay,
I
then.
was fine with it. It went on a little bit too long, but it was fine.
Mike Tenay and Don West started telling us what is happening on the show tonight when Kid Kash stormed to the ring and said he is not responsible for what happens to Terry Taylor tonight. Yes, the same Terry Taylor who is, in fact, the Mid South television champion in 1984. But we'll get to that here in a minute or six. Backstage, Scott Hudson is with Jerry Lynn and asks Jerry Lynn about his 5-man elimination match coming next. Lynn said that Eric Watts is the one smart person in the TNA office since he gives him the chance to do what he does best, which is to wrestle. Which makes you wonder whose idea was it to give Jerry Lynn a microphone to talk, since he just said this is not what he does best. Lynn said this match will be special. Spoiler, it will not be. He said it's not if he can hang with the young guys, but if they can hang with him. I'm not going to say Jerry Lynn is an awful promo, but again, we're not using Jerry Lynn to his absolute strength if we're relying on him to cut weekly promos.
He's fine at it, I guess, but not really. I mean, he could talk a little bit. I mean, I think the only good promo he had was in ECW when he called himself the new effing show. But I really can't think of any other promo where he actually shined with his words. He's more of an actions person, which is good. Other than that, he also had this, death metal voice. You get the deep voice at the end where it's like destruction or something like that.
Jerry.
Or for his later TNA theme, Fiora.
His later TNA theme, I don't even think he wrestles much longer than this because I know at some point they bench him to be an agent, and then he makes his little comeback in 2007-ish, and then is gone again. Um, Anyway, we go to the ring for our first match. It is Nosawa versus Frankie Kazarian versus Juventud Guerrera versus Chris Sabin versus Jerry Lynn in a number one contenders elimination match. Much like last week, how Frankie Kazarian got distracted by a pretty girl at ringside, Frankie Kazarian got distracted by Lollipop, a woman that he has seen every single week on this show, and just now is distracted by her. I gotta tell you, Cindy, it must be difficult for Frankie Kazarian to find good-looking women out where he lives in Southern California.
Shocking, isn't it?
Yes, I know if there's one thing Southern California doesn't have, it's pretty people. They're not known for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so here's the thing: shouldn't Sabin already be the number one contender? He won the Super X Cup. He hasn't been beaten since. They've had one show and he won his match last week. So it's not like, oh, well, Sabin won, but then he lost to, Kazarian last week. So now it's debatable who the number one contender is. No, Sabin won the tournament. Sabin won his six-man last week. And now for some reason, Sabin is not the number one contender and has to wrestle for it. Now, before this match, Tenay and West talked about how, all the countries are, represented: Japan, Mexico, the US, and Canada. Now, I'm assuming Eric Young was supposed to be part of this match, but there was no Canadian representation unless we're pretending that Detroit is part of Canada now.
I guess Sabin did a lot of Border City. Was Border City Wrestling around in like 2003? So
Yes,
he
but that
was
still doesn't make Sabin Canadian.
honorary Canadian. He's from Detroit. You take a tunnel bus to Windsor.
So Nasawa got the shine against Kazarian and Hubi at the start of the match, which was smart since he was the person in this match with the least credibility. Lynn did a hurricanrana running down the apron to Sabin, who was on the floor. Some of the fans began chanting for ICP because Nasawa works for ICP's Juggalo Championship Wrestling promotion. Not a typo, by the way. So, of course, despite all the fan favoritism, Nasawa was the first person eliminated, as Hubi pinned him with the Hubi driver. And I'll be honest, maybe I missed it, but this is when I realized it was an elimination match. I thought it was a one fall match. And so I actually had to go back and type elimination into all the other spots where we talked about this match. Sabin blind tagged himself in when Kazarian had Hubi up on his shoulders, and Sabin launched up the top rope with a missile dropkick where he hit both men with one foot. Hubi felt that the missile dropkick must be his move as he broke out a springboard version of it moments later. Sabin tagged himself in and got hit with a wave of the future, but got his foot on the ropes and then pinned Kazarian with the cradle shock, which he debuted last week. Lynn at one point had a waistlock on Huvi. Sabin did a sunset flip, which caused Lynn to give Huvi a bridging German suplex, which looked really nice. Lynn and Guerrero did the Malenko Guerrero near falls, which culminated in Lynn pinning Huvi with the Emerald Fusion. Michael Shane came out to watch the finish. Lynn used the top rope superplex. Personally, I was hoping for the Dynamite Kid Randy Savage finish, where Lynn would do the superplex and then Sabin would cradle him. But nope, we just had Sabin kicking out of a standard cover. The referee got knocked down because why not? Shane ran down and tried to hit Lynn with the title belt, but Lynn ducked and Sabin got hit, so Lynn pinned Sabin with a cradle pile driver. They tried to have a great match. This was the best match on the show. Not that there's a whole lot of competition for that, but something was missing to keep it from going to that next level, and the finish certainly did not help. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10.
I gave it a 7.5 out of 10 as well. I thought the action was very good. I liked the cradle shock, and I thought it was the right order of eliminations. Because very rarely do we get that in these type of matches. I mean, I think it was right for Nasawa to be the first one out. You could have flip-flopped Nasawa and Kazarian because Kazarian's got the distracted by beauty gimmick going right now. So that's fine. Hoovy, we talked about earlier, has got visa issues, so he probably lost, so he can go away for a bit and have those sorted out. Big ups to Scott D'Amore for getting that fixed. And Sabin versus Lynn is a match you could watch any day of the week and not get bored. I shaved off a half point because of the TNA trope of, and then there's a ref bump, because it's like every other match you'll get one.
Makes me wonder why we even need a ref bump. It's not like TNA does disqualifications, except for the once every 6 months they do a title change on a DQ just to remind you that they have it. But
Why not just do what they always do to avoid that and do a no contest?
There you go. We're gonna have one of those later tonight. So Scott Hudson is with Mad Mikey and Shark Boy. Mikey is randomly dressed like SpongeBob SquarePants and is not happy about it, which makes you wonder why he is dressed like SpongeBob SquarePants. They were attacked by Sonny Siaki and Jamal. Tanay and West were completely nonplussed by this, but they did confirm that Jamal's name is ECMO. Now, I want to point out they flew
clothing company.
Yeah, they flew in at least two of the people in this segment for this segment. And normally I would say, well, maybe they taped it last week to be smart people. However, it's TNA and it's Vince Russo. You don't expect them to have known a week ahead of time that this segment will be happening, do you?
Nope. And I'm also looking at, because I think they have them there, for Explosion, because they'll tape matches with them for Explosion. So I'm looking that up right now. This is 60. Oh, how about that? They did something for Explosion this week.
Yippee.
So ECMO and Sonny wrestled Axis and Python.
Uh-huh.
Oh, here's a match you'll hear a lot. Are you ready for this Explosion match?
America's Most Wanted beat the Naturals.
Yep, exactly right.
It was the second best match on the entire show, according to the people who were there.
Yeah. And they've worked together in the Tennessee Independent, Burt Prentice's USA Championship Wrestling is where they normally wrestle.
Okay, we spend way too much time talking about this segment. Talk about the next segment, Cindy.
All right, so let me get my notes. So we get a recap of the Russo power play where Piper got ejected from TNA. And then we get another sit-down interview with Roddy Piper, and these usually go as well as you expect, which means they don't go well at all. Piper is insinuating that everybody at TNA headquarters is all corporate, which is something that bothered him because they rejected him because he was like a legend in the business, and have it be more sports entertainment, like WWE. And so he's basically insinuating that he's been fired again. Spoiler alert, this is not the only sit-down interview that he'll have. He'll have another one next week, which Don West hypes.
How the hell did you get anything out of this? This was another convoluted mess, somehow made worse by the fact that it was pre-recorded. You could see the edits. It was not a smooth edit.
Yeah.
Like Piper was making no sense at all, and they tried to save it by editing it all to hell. And if that made it better, then Jesus H. Christ, I can only imagine what it actually was. And this is not the only part of this. Like Cindy said, they announced later on that part 2 is next week. I, there's no fucking way to save this. They did not have to air it. Remember, like, I forget what it was. There was a sit down interview like 6 to 8 months ago that they taped, but because, one of the segments in the ring went long, they didn't air it. Or they didn't air it for like a week or two or whatever. But yeah, like, this was almost as pointless. Actually, no, it was more pointless than the ones with Sting. Because the Sting ones were bad enough, and that now at least he's coherent and can keep, on subject. Piper is not coherent on a good day, and this was not a good day.
When was the
Then
last really good Piper talking segment? Because I have to go back to like the backstage promo you had with Bret the Hitman Hart at WrestleMania 8 for the best one that you had in a while. And that was 11 years ago.
I'd say at best you're going like 97 WCW. At best. Even then I can't even tell you, oh yeah, that's the promo to go to.
The Alcatraz promo.
Yeah, sure. That segment where he had to he announced he was gonna fight people to form a team for Uncensored, and it was John Tenta, his Brutus, and that other guy. Um, we went back to the ring where Don Callis explained how he had to choose between Russo and Piper. On a normal day, Callis would have gotten bigger heat here than he does in modern day wrestling. Callis said he did this for all the fans. The fans want Russo and need Russo. And for some reason, he decided to target Jeff Jarrett now. And he began shouting that last week, Jeff Jarrett put his hands on him. So he has the great pleasure in announcing Jarrett's future in wrestling. And he was in the middle of screaming that Jarrett was fired when Eric Watts' music played. And much like last week when Dusty Rhodes' music played and no one had any idea who the hell it was until they walked through the curtain, no one had any idea what Eric Watts' music was until Eric Watts walked through the curtain. And Eric Watts didn't just come through the curtain by himself, but Eric Watts, who's like 6'5", 250, 260 pounds, he's in good shape. Whatever, he looks like he can stand up for himself. He had black shirt security with him. And black shirt security is Rick Santel and Chris Vaughn, who are very small people. They're not little people, but they are probably a foot shorter and 100 pounds lighter than Eric Watts.
They're essentially the same size as an X Division wrestler.
They are X Division wrestlers. They're X Division wrestlers who aren't good enough to be on the show, which we'll get to in a minute. However, it really hit home just how small they were because Callis is in the ring with the red shirts, and the fucking red shirts are, 8.5 feet tall and 350 pounds in comparison. And by the way, the black shirts, who are the baby faces, came out with chairs and began braining the red shirts. Why? Because the red shirts are mean. Because the red shirts weren't doing anything. They were standing there behind Don Callis, doing their job as security, and the black shirts ran out with chairs and hit them with them. Because why the hell not? Watts takes the mic and announces that in the next 30 days, Jarrett would wrestle AJ for the world title, and tonight Jarrett will be wrestling Daniels. Before we go on, let me just ask you this, Cindy. If Eric Watts had the ability to just book Jeff Jarrett in a world title match, what the hell took him so long? Because Russo's been saying for 3 months that Jarrett's not going to get a world title match, and Watts has been the director of authority since at least the middle of July. So in theory, he could have booked Jarrett in a world title match at any point in the last 9 weeks.
I have no clue. I honestly don't.
And you're not supposed to. You're supposed. They didn't bother to come up with a good explanation. Jared didn't have to, go through. Oh, okay. If you beat these five guys, Jared, you're going to get a world title match. It's not even like Jared. If you beat this one person, because he booked him against Chris Daniels. It's not even like, okay, I'll tell you what. If he beats Chris Daniels, he can have a world title match. It's just, Jared, you're going to get a world title match. Okay, then. Because, yeah, spoiler alert, the other reign of terror is about to begin. Um, then Eric Watts booked AJ in a bunkhouse brawl with Dusty Rhodes, and then confirmed that the tag team titles would be on the line on this show. And did such a poor job explaining it, Tenay and West had to yell over him and say that it's going to be a six-man tag match for the tag titles. Then, because again, Watts is really shitty at communicating shit, he announces that the Gathering and the New Church are going to have an NWA style six-man tag. What is NWA style, you might ask? Is it a standard six-man tag where two people will grapple in the ring and then each of their partners will be waiting patiently on the apron with their hands outstretched for a tag? No, you silly goose. NWA style apparently means a dog collar match. This is like a few years ago when Dreamer would be on Impact and they'd announce that he'd be having an old school rules match, and
Yeah.
old school rules meant an ECW match. Um, and then Watts booked the red shirts versus the black shirts for right now. I want to point out, as this match is about to start, we're going to get the red shirts versus the black shirts. We're 45 minutes into the show, and Watts just booked like half a dozen matches. What the hell was originally on this show? Were they expecting Kid Kash and Terry Taylor to do 60 minutes on their own?
Probably.
It's like, good lord. And apparently, reading Dave's write-up in the Observer this week, apparently all they announced ahead of time was Kid Kash versus Terry Taylor and the five-way X Division match. And guess what? People thought this was a show that you could skip, so they skipped it. And it had like the least amount of feedback of any TNA show up to this point. Because, the matches that would theoretically, might sell a few buys, they just didn't bother announcing ahead of time.
It's kind of that's the indictment of this episode of TNA. I mean, what was the point? We have two matches hyped. One was good, and we'll talk about the other one.
I didn't even say there was anything bad with the other one, except for the shitty booking of the finish, which is the, rule of thumb for TNA.
Yeah.
It's like, but it's also, it wasn't selling any buys. No one was buying the show to see Kid Kash versus Terry Taylor. Like, if you're going to buy the show to see Kid Kash versus a legend, like we had Ricky Morton, who's a bigger star than Terry Taylor. Who else did we have? We had Bobby Eaton the one week.
Larry
it's like
Zbyszko.
we had Larry Zbyszko. It's like it's just okay, fine. This one actually had some build. They spent 2 weeks or 3 weeks building up Kid Kash versus Terry Taylor for some reason. But guess what? Nobody bought this show for Kid Kash versus Terry Taylor. And here's the thing,
nobody buys a ticket to see Terry Taylor. Like,
here's the thing too. Nobody who picks and chooses the shows they want to watch and then goes and reads the results afterwards if they skipped one. No one's read the rest of the results of this show and thought to themselves, oh man, I missed something big. I wish I would have bought this show. But if you would have said in advance, okay, because last week we inferred that Jeff Jarrett would wrestle Christopher Daniels. They didn't actually tell us this. But if they would have said, oh, we're going to have Jeff Jarrett versus Chris Daniels this week, maybe I'll buy it. Oh, we're going to have the New Church versus the Gathering in a six-man dog collar match. Maybe I'll buy it. But again, it wasn't anything that if you were the results after the show, I'd be like, yeah, it's okay. I could skip that.
Yeah.
So then we get the black shirt security versus the red shirt security. Now, like a year ago, and I was shocked Tanae brought this up, but like a year ago, when they started the TNA versus SEX storyline, Tanae was in the ring and announced that Chris Vaughn and Rick Santel, who are the black shirt security guys, are the future of the NWA, which probably explains why the NWA is in the shitty place it currently is. So the red shirts are Kevin Northcutt and Ryan Wilson. And, like I said earlier, they're both very large men, very large, very muscular. Ryan Wilson actually, they tried to push him at one point as Triton, but that's in a few years. But like again, he's a big guy. When the average non-wrestling fan thinks of a professional wrestler, they think of somebody who looks like Ryan Wilson and Kevin Northcutt, a big muscular guy. Chris Vaughn and Rick Santel. I'm sure if we put them in the ring with the AJ Styleses, Chris Sabins, Frankie Kazarians, Michael Shanes, they'd look perfectly adequate. They'd look like normal sized human beings, but part of me, they look like midgets here. And and they were so nondescript and interchangeable that West called one of the guys Rick Vaughn at one point.
I was hoping, like, when I heard that, I was like, oh, come on. I want Charlie Sheen to come out so bad and throw fastballs. It'd be much better than this match.
Was it? Oh my God. Was it Caitlyn that before she was Caitlyn, she had a name stolen from somebody in Major League, and I think it was supposed to be Ricky Vaughn. Maybe it wasn't Caitlyn, but somebody that ended up with a different name that you're better known by. I could swear an FCW was like Ricky Vaughn. And anyway, so the
I
red
remember
shirts
the
had this
same thing.
Yeah. By the way, notice neither of us are in a hurry to go Google this because I can tell you I'm not. Uh, the red shirts had this match won about 12 or 13 times, but Rick Santel showed what a bad friend he was by breaking up the pin. It was so bad that West flat out said that Santel isn't really his friend because he would just let it go. Vaughn got shellacked in and out of the ring. We are informed that Chris Vaughn is a moron who will never submit. And I'll tell you what, we're going to bury this finish especially, but it's like Chris Vaughn and Rick Santel took a hell of a beating, especially Vaughn, because they beat Chris Vaughn's ass in the ring, out of the ring. If there's a way to beat him in a different place, they would have beaten him there too. It was a hell of an ass kicking. And you knew something had to be up because it just would not end. This was your weekly 2-minute enhancement match that went at least 5 minutes. Santel got a hot tag, got his head taken off. Vaughn tried getting back involved, so Ryan Wilson press slammed him from the ring and threw him about halfway up the ramp, which is just tremendous. And then Eric Watts, who's supposed to be the unbiased authority figure, showed an incredible amount of bias by getting in the ring and giving Kevin Northcutt a choke slam. And then Rick Santel, I don't know, I think he was falling asleep and he was just rolling over in his sleep because he rolled over and an arm got draped over Northcutt. And the referee, who, by the way, somehow did not see or hear anything that happened, turned around and counted 3. And yes, the black shirt security defeated the red shirt security in this tag team match. And just based purely on how good of an ass kicking Chris took, I gave it a 2.0 out of 10.
Wow. A 2.0 out of 10. I gave
Chris
it a
Vaughn
0.5.
Chris Vaughn took a hell of an ass kicking.
Yeah, he did. I think we have a contender for worst TNA wrestler that we've watched.
Ooh.
Ryan Wilson.
How do you like? What the hell did Ryan Wilson do that led to this title of worst wrestler? Because you mentioned that on Twitter, or not on Twitter, but on Facebook. And after the show, I'm like, who the hell is she even talking about?
Like, I saw Ryan Wilson when he was Triton, And I was like, this guy sucks. And he also has one of the worst matches in TNA history. Look up, I think it's one of the early 2005 pay-per-views or Final Destination 2004 where he has an awful match with Monty Brown.
And how does that make him the worst wrestler in TNA now? He's not wrestling Monty Brown now. He's throwing Rick Vaughn and Chris, well, wow, Rick, whatever his name is, and Chris Vaughn all over the place. Rick Santel.
See, that's another reason why I thought the match sucked. Nobody. Feuding security teams sucks ass.
Yes, it does. But, again, especially because, Chris and Rick picked a fight that they could not win,
And also Eric Watts helps him out, which undercuts black shirt security.
Yes, because they would have been so much better had that didn't happen. But yeah,
right.
like they got squashed. They got a win, and I don't know. I haven't watched next week's show yet, but I'm gonna bet they're not suddenly so much more over because they got the win here. Like this match did nothing for anybody except show you that Chris could take a hell of an ass kicking, and that Kevin Northcutt and Ryan Wilson can throw around a very small man.
Right.
I did not sit here watch this and thought, wow, Ryan Wilson sucks. I like it was a 2-minute enhancement match that went 5 minutes, and you knew something was screwy was going to happen because it went 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And because it's TNA, and there has to be interference in every match.
And something really did get screwed because post-match, Eric Watts was checking up on Chris Vaughn, and he pointed to his collarbone, which he legitimately did screw up his collarbone in that match.
I mean, the guy got flung like 10 feet out of the ring onto the ramp. So, I mean, that was not the safest bump of all time to take. But which, by the way, explains where Ryan Wilson went, because after Ryan Wilson did that to him, Ryan just disappeared. Because Northcutt was the one in the ring that took the choke slam, and Ryan somehow didn't get back in the ring to break it up.
So something tells me Ryan Wilson screwed something up.
Well, whoever had the idea to do that move, but because you don't want to let other people give you a bump. You want to take your own bump, and it's the one key way to get injured is to have other people bump you. If you're in charge of your own bump, then it's a lot harder to get injured. Anyway, backstage, Scott Hudson is with Terry Taylor, who has stolen Bobby Roode's robe. And before somebody nicely points this out to me, I'm aware it was Terry Taylor's robe first. But yeah, this is the robe that Bobby Roode wore pretty much until like 2017. This robe, Bobby Roode got got a few years out of it because I don't know if he actually ever bought it from Terry Taylor, or if Terry Taylor just like lent it to him or whatever, or gave it to him. Because like Bobby Roode, when he gets not his babyface turn, but when he gets his singles push after Team Canada and begins wearing a robe, it's this Terry Taylor robe. Anyway, Terry Taylor, okay, it makes sense when you stop and think about it. But Terry Taylor says that he's 48 years old here. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, is that it? Because it's like, again, the guy who's been wrestling since before you were born, you just kind of assume that he's older than 48, especially when you're 40 now. Yeah, Terry Taylor's 48 years old. He's coming out of retirement. By the way, John Cena's 48 now too, so keep that in mind. But Terry Taylor's coming, quote unquote, out of retirement to take on Kid Kash, and he said you do not go into a gunfight with a knife. And what did he mean by that? Well, it's simple. He brought out America's Most Wanted to be in his corner for his one-on-one match with Kid Kash, who has Abyss in his corner. Because this is TNA, it's important for the baby faces to have the 3-on-2 advantage. Now, did you look up when Tenay said that Terry Taylor's last match had been almost 10 years before a 1995 match against Ric Flair?
I did.
Okay. He's wrestled a lot since then. He's had at least 60 reported matches since that point, including run is a strong word. But first of all, the match was in '94, but that's nitpicking. But Terry Taylor wrestled a bunch of WCW house show matches, a bunch of indie matches, including like recent-ishly, and a handful of WWF matches, including a pair of house shows in May of 1999 against Kurt Angle. So what I'm saying is Terry Taylor has wrestled several times since that Ric Flair match a decade ago.
Now, further proof that Terry Taylor is nothing more than a little bitch.
See, here's the thing, and you need to watch Mid-South if you think that anything on this match showed that Terry Taylor was a little bitch, because Terry Taylor was fine with an asterisk here. Like, he wrestled like a guy who doesn't really wrestle anymore and used to wrestle back in the day. Like, he was a perfectly adequate-ish wrestler. Like, he wasn't bad. This just was not a match that needed to be on pay-per-view in 2003. Taylor out-wrestled Cash, who had to go outside and slap Abyss for inspiration, I guess. Cash got back in the ring and raked the eyes to take over this professional wrestling match. Cash threw Taylor outside the ring and told Abyss to go attack Taylor, but AMW threw Taylor back in the ring. Abyss was so upset about this that he attacked AMW. Abyss and James Storm both got in the ring at this point. Abyss gave Terry Taylor the black hole slam. Storm knocked Abyss out of the ring, and Harris speared Cash, and Taylor pinned him. So basically the exact same finish as the last match, and just like the last match, somehow the referee didn't see any of this. This was a nothing match. I gave it a 1.0 out of 10.
I gave it a 0.5 out of 10. Like, this match stunk. And none of it was Kid Cash's fault.
This match did what?
Stunk.
By the way, Brock Lesnar, also 48 years old. So, just look at this and see that Brock Lesnar and Terry Taylor and John Cena are all the same. Well, Brock Lesnar and John Cena in 2025 and Terry Taylor in 2003 are all the same age. Just throwing that out there.
Did you see the sign at WrestlePalooza when Brock Lesnar came out?
That would have required me to watch WrestlePalooza.
Well, there's a sign. I didn't watch it either. I found it on Blue Sky. A sign was shown saying he shouldn't be here. We all know why.
Yes. By the way, I forgot to mention this, and this is a joke that's 2 weeks old, but I kept forgetting to mention it. This show is sponsored by Drag Kings. Go to dragkings.com right now and match your first deposit up to $100,000. Drag Kings, an official sponsor of something else.
I think
joke that nobody
dead.
gets. Oh yeah, the joke was dead because I forgot to say it last week. But Cyndi and I were talking about the NFL Red Zone channel and how they now have commercials. But I pointed out to her that they're basically just airing a bunch of like 15-second DraftKings commercials. And Cyndi made a comment that she'd rather have it be sponsored by Drag Kings. And so I made a note to myself to say that on the show. And then I forgot to do it. So here we are.
Well, I also say that because all those sports wagering apps aren't legal here in Washington State.
By the way, as always, remember, DraftKings and all that, sponsors of Major League Baseball, the National Football League, the NBA, the NHL, all places where the players themselves are not allowed to use the service. Use the code lifetime ban to match your first deposit of up to $1 million. Anywho, Scott Hudson was now in Eric Watts' office where Vince Russo was yelling at him. Watts, not Hudson. Watts threatened to shove Russo's bat up his ass. Russo's, not Hudson's. Anything you wish to add to that?
No, I'll have a comment about
Oh,
Russo's look later in the match when we actually get it in full view.
all right. Jeff Jarrett versus Christopher Daniels in what is surprisingly their first singles match. Because these two have been feuding since like the end of July when Daniels did that thing where he was in Japan. So he taped like a month of promos. And then the 1 week you thought he was still in Japan, but he came out and attacked Jarrett. That was the end of July. This is now the end of September. And this is their first one-on-one match. Daniels has his altar boys again this week, but now they're called the Followers. Capital T, capital F. The Followers. Daniels got the better of the match early on and ordered his minions to not interfere. Jarrett sidestepped a dive to the outside and threatened to turn this into a Jeff Jarrett match, but Daniels realized this, so he rolled back into the ring before we could get to the crowd brawling. Daniels took over and got the heat. He broke out the best moonsault ever, which is not the first time he's done this, but maybe the first time that Tanay and West were paying attention to it because they marked out to it to the point that we had to get a replay of it, which is, hey, it's a beautiful move, and I'm always happy to see a replay of it. But man, it's, again, not the first time he's used that here in total nonstop action.
Here's a
Daniels
question
laid.
I want to build off that.
Mhm.
Who do you think does it better? Who do you think does it better? Daniels with that one, or how close does Tiffany Stratton come with her PME, the prettiest moonsault ever?
I was gonna say, before you started saying that, I'm like, I hope to God she doesn't compare Christopher Daniels to Tiffany Stratton. Next, you're gonna ask me who does the Styles Clash better, AJ Styles or Michelle McCool. With that said, Tiffany Stratton's is A-okay, but it's not Christopher Daniels. And I guess while we're pointing this out, Michelle McCool has broken 0 people's necks with the Styles Clash. To be fair, it's not like AJ injured one person, and it was his fault. Everybody else who's ever taken the Styles Clash and got fucked up, it was their fault for tucking their chin instead of putting your head back like you're supposed to. Um, Cindy, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, you went
Uh,
deceptively quiet there for a second.
well, because I wanted to
Anywho,
let you. I wanted to let you. Sometimes I am quiet because I want to just let you rant and get all this stuff off of your chest.
come on, you know I will never stop. I can always rant about something on the show. I used to do well, but not the TNA shows. But before I dragged you and Trey into this, I used to do those shows by myself. I could rant for an hour or so, just talking to myself. Not that we need the return of that, by the way. Just saying. Occasionally, I need to take a breath. Anyway, Daniels laid out Jarrett with a blue thunder bomb when a follower jumped up on the apron. A second follower got in the ring and got kicked into the ropes where he crotched Daniels. Jarrett then won with a small package. Jeff Jarrett, by the way, the man getting a world title match at some point in the next 30 days, could not just beat Christopher Daniels. He needed a follower to do a miscommunication spot in order to beat him. Why couldn't Jeff Jarrett just beat him? Because we needed to have the scene after the match where Christopher Daniels beat up the follower. He took off one of the other followers' belts and whipped him with it.
He also choked him
Now,
with it.
yes. And honestly, you know what it reminded me of, even though it's not for another 3 or 4 years? When Raven was managing Kazarian, Michael Shane, and Johnny Devine, who
Oh
were
God, serotonin.
Yes, when they were on the show simply so they could lose and Raven could come beat them up. That's pretty much exactly like the point of this was. Why do we have altar boys? Because we needed Christopher Daniels to beat them up. And so this match, I mean, Jeff Jarrett versus Christopher Daniels, it's what you'd think it would be. It's a very fine level wrestling match. It would have been better if it was about them and not, the minions. But I gave the match a 6.0 out of 10.
I gave it a 5.5 out of 10. We're pretty much on the same guidelines. The reason why I wasn't really keen on the finish is because before the match, Tenay and West said Daniels has explicitly told his followers not to get involved. And when Christopher Daniels had the advantage, they got involved. It's like, why?
How do you think a 2003 match between Jeff Jarrett and Bryan Danielson would have gone? I think Jarrett would have squashed him in 2 minutes, and Danielson would have been too nice to have done anything about it.
Especially in 2003.
I think this is in the middle of his 6 or 9 month period where he lived in England the whole time.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is before he, like, guess does he really come back to ROH before he wins the title? I guess I'll find out in a few months here because I haven't watched any Ring of Honor in a few weeks here. But we'll have to see. So backstage, Scott Hudson is with Dusty Rhodes, who thankfully showed up this week so he could be booked in a match. Rhodes said this is about having respect for the food you put on the table or something like that. And then Dusty said he was going to go to his truck and have a beer before the match. Okay.
All right, fine. He's
All
daring
right, so
AJ to stand up by himself and without Russo, so whatever. Decent promo.
But yeah, I was gonna say it was almost as coherent as Piper's promo earlier.
Nothing's that incoherent.
We then get our 6-man tag match where Simon Diamond, David Young, and Glenn Gilberti defend Simon and Swinger's NWA World Tag Team titles against the 3 Live Crew. And we haven't seen David Young since the alliance with Sonny Siaki fell apart. So everyone gets in the ring, the bell rings, the match starts, 3 Live Crew disposes of their opponents to the floor, and then they took the mic to talk for a little bit. Conan accused the heels of having sex with each other, and I don't know, what is Conan and BG's problem with the gay community, apparently, because, BG does a move where he attempts to have anal sex with his opponent before slamming him. Conan, at the beginning of this match, was doing the 10 punches of doom to Simon and then tried to force Simon to give him a blowjob. Maybe Conan and BG's issues with consensual gay sex. Because if you remember last year, BG had a problem when Bruce was willingly choosing to receive the gay anal sex power slam.
Mm-hmm.
So BG got the hot tag and we broke down to a 6-way brawl. I note that Killings at this point is the only member of the team who should be getting an in-ring push, and he's the one that they're getting the heat on. And I mean, I guess, again, he's by far the best in-ring wrestler of the 3 at this point. But it's like I wanted to see him not only they get the heat on him, but also make his own hot tag, to be honest, at this point. And let's see here. BG got that tag. We got a 6-way brawl. We had a heel miscommunication spot, which saw Simon super kick Young, and Truth became the 3rd person on the show to miss a drop kick. This one to Diamond. The finish saw David Young actually get a win, pinning BG with a spine buster after Gilberti clonked BG with a chair. Not an interference finish, but still a fuck finish. This was nothing special, but also nothing terrible. 2.5 out of 10.
I don't remember what I gave it. That can't be right. I gave it a 5.5 written down, but no. I don't know what I was thinking. I was playing too much Palatra around that time. 3.5 out of 10, I think, is fair. What gets me was the finish, because David Young was the hired hand. Why couldn't you just
Honestly,
have?
I just assumed that they were losing the belts here, and David Young was here to do the job.
That's one way to put it, but it's a decent swerve, I guess. But if you're gonna have Gilberti, Diamond, and quote unquote Swinger retain, why not just have Simon Diamond pick up the pin?
Hmm.
I mean, at least it would make sense. I mean, you could still have the finish with the chair spot and have Simon Diamond do. I don't know what's his solo finisher. Pile driver or something. I don't like. All I remember from Simon Diamond is he was a tag teamer, so I don't remember him solo.
Well, anywho, so Tenay excitedly sends us outside the arena. Now, a lot of times when he does this, he excitedly sends us outside the arena where nothing is happening, which is to just show us that Tenay is an excellent prognosticator, because usually seconds after that is when stuff starts happening. Well, this time he sends us outside the arena where AJ is beating up Dusty Rhodes. And while AJ is beating up Dusty Rhodes, the bell rang inside the arena and a referee was running out there. So, yes, AJ Styles attacking Dusty Rhodes outside of the arena started the bunkhouse match between AJ and Dusty Rhodes. And they were outside the arena. Scott Hudson just happened to be there for some reason. Maybe when Dusty said he was going to go have a beer, Hudson thought that he was invited to go have a beer with Dusty. I don't know. But Hudson is there and he does commentary while they're fighting outside the arena. And then as soon as they get inside the arena, Tenay and West take over. I'd almost be okay with that being an actual trope in TNA, that anytime there's fighting going on outside of the inside of the arena there where the ring is, in the room itself where the ring and the fans are, Scott Hudson is the one doing commentary on it. Anyway, Russo was hitting Dusty repeatedly with a boot. Now, I got no idea where this boot came from, because moments later, Dusty took off one of his own boots and was hitting AJ with it. And it was very clear that he still had the other boot on his foot. And both Russo and Russo and AJ both had two shoes on. No idea, like I said, no idea where that extra boot came from. Maybe we're supposed to believe Dusty had an extra boot in the back of his truck that Russo grabbed. AJ took. Then we have perhaps the moment of the millennium in professional wrestling. AJ Styles, they're in the ring at this point. AJ Styles took off his belt and unbuttoned his trousers because I don't know. And so Dusty then grabbed AJ Styles, the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, the title that goes back to 1948 and dates to Lou Thesz and Pat O'Connor and all these people. Dusty Rhodes pulled down AJ Styles' trousers and his underwear, showing everyone AJ's bare ass, and began spanking AJ before Trinity and Jeff Jarrett ran down and got in the ring. I didn't even see Trinity at first until she was actually in the ring. I saw Jarrett in the background running towards the ring. But Trinity gets in the ring, and for some reason, Trinity is wearing a very short dress. Trinity has never worn a very short dress ever on this show, but she was here. And the reason why she was wearing a very short dress is so Dusty could pull up her very short dress, revealing her almost bare ass because she was wearing a G-string. And so Trinity got spanked in the biggest pop on this show in what feels like months was Trinity's bare ass. So, ladies and gentlemen, Trinity's ass is over. Then, despite the fact that this entire match Russo was interfering the entire time, despite the fact that it's a bunkhouse match, so there's no disqualifications, no countouts, yada, 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 yada. The referee decides that's enough, that's too much, we're throwing the match out. It is a no contest in a bunkhouse match. As for a rating, I'll just read what I wrote. I don't know. 2 out of 10. That sounds right.
I had here moments of note. Russo looks like a reject from the Grateful Dead tour. Dusty uses his boot to punch AJ while Russo is smacking Dusty with a boot. Scott Hudson doing commentary outside having be just as good as Tenay's. AJ tried to get cute with Dusty, but Dusty pulled AJ's fancy underwear down to the delight of many and spanked his ass. Jeff Jarrett counters Trinity's interference and set her up for Dusty to spank her ass to the delight of many. Match was a no contest. It was fine. 3 out of 10.
They didn't
Mainly for
announce the
Trinity's
matches
ass.
for. Yes. They didn't announce what we're going to see next week. Is ECMO and Sonny Siaki versus Mad Mikey and Shark Boy. Why that had to be announced in advance, who knows? We're also going to get. This is when we found out that Roddy Piper interview is going to have a second part. Part 2 of the Roddy Piper interview. Then we're going to get Michael Shane versus Jerry Lynn for the X Division title, which sounds good. Kid Kash and Abyss versus America's Most Wanted, which sounds good. And then AJ storms to the ring and says that he is not okay with spanking young men's butts. And then in a line that was so obviously scripted for him and that he was so obviously not comfortable talking about, he said he does not get respect by marrying the boss's daughter. And just to remind you, the Claire Lynch storyline begins with the strong implication that he is sleeping with Dixie. AJ said that he will defend the title against Dusty Rhodes next week. Russo ran down and yelled at him, saying Dusty will not get a title match, and instead it will be him and AJ Styles versus Jeff Jarrett and Dusty Rhodes. That is somehow less appealing than AJ versus Dusty.
I wish we'd rather have AJ versus Dusty because it could be a garbage brawl like this was. And AJ can bullshit a win or something. I don't know. Maybe Jarrett has the guitar. Dusty has AJ held. Jarrett's going to line up a guitar shot because then Jarrett will fight Dusty. Hey, easier match. But then AJ ducks. Dusty gets kabonged. AJ wins, and AJ has to fight Jarrett in a few weeks. That'd be a much better match than what winds up being Vince Russo's last professional wrestling match, I think.
Oh, darn. I am so sad. Okay. Now, despite everything we talked about on the show, I want it to be nice. I don't want to sit here and just talk shit about the show nonstop because we're going to be watching this fucking show for another year. You know, I want to say nice things. I want to enjoy myself because believe it or not, I don't want to sit here and complain about this show for the next year. There's better things I can do with my life than complain about TNA for a year. So up next, we got what I wanted to write was highlights, but I couldn't write that. We got lights of the Shane Douglas versus Raven match from last week. Again, wanted to say nice things, but the first thing they showed on this was Shane Douglas throwing up. Why did they need to show that? Anyway, so that leads into an interview with Jim Mitchell, who said that Vampiro is the final piece of a perfectly executed plan to show Raven true pain and humiliation. Mitchell said that Raven is the first person to be scalped in front of a live audience, And while that is still a disgusting sight to behold, at least they're trying to get something out of this. They're trying to play it up. I guess that's the nicest thing I can say right now.
Yep.
Anything to say about this Jim Mitchell promo?
I mean, it's a good Jim Mitchell promo. I mean, what more could you want?
Mm-hmm. So then we go to our main event, which is Shane Douglas, Splash, and Sinn versus Raven, CM Punk, and Julio Dinero in a triple dog collar match. And it was decided that the baby faces, for some reason, would get to wear the dog collars to the ring and attach themselves to their opponents. Referee Andrew Thomas should be the person in charge of putting the dog collars on everybody. However, he appeared to just be as biased as Eric Watts was earlier and allow the baby faces to do whatever the hell they wanted. Oh well. Raven got on the Cobra Clutch, which, as mentioned last week, was a million times better than Hercules' version that he used in '84 Mid-South. Everyone was bleeding here, and this match, for better or worse, was exactly what it should have been. Slash stood on the ramp at one point and yanked his dog chain, causing CM Punk to baseball slide out of the ring and splat on the floor. That looked uncomfortable. Shane at one point looked at the video wall and saw he was bleeding, which caused him to fire up on Raven. Did he not notice he was bleeding before that point?
I guess not.
While the camera... So here's the finish with an asterisk. The camera was pointed at Raven and Shane Douglas fighting outside the ring. In the background, you could hear a bump being taken to the ring and the referee counting to 3. And at that point, we pulled out to see Julio had pinned Slash. So, yes, this finish we did not even see on TV. And to make things better, they did not consider that to be an important thing to show, as we didn't even get a replay of it. And keep in mind, the reason why we didn't get a replay of it, because we had to quickly go to a post-match angle because the show was running out of time here. The finish of the show, the finish after the match, sees Vampiro run down and give Raven a wonky-looking spin kick. The heels beat up the baby faces, including Slash giving Punk a whirly-bird powerbomb. They beat up the baby faces through the crowd to that area in front of the door that Jeff Jarrett and Christopher Daniels came through. And they did what they tried to claim. And again, because they were running out of time, so they had to get this done as quickly as possible, they tried to claim that the New Church and Shane Douglas were hanging the gathering. Now, the issue with that is the dog collars were not on Raven and CM Punk very tightly. You could openly see that neither of these people were being choked. Not that I want them to be choked, but Raven looked like a fucking idiot because he's throwing his head back and screaming, and you could probably fit a human arm inside of the gap between the dog collar and his throat. Then, again, because they're running out of time, they're announcing that they're hanging all 3 of them, and you could see plain as day Julio, A, is not being hung, but B, they're trying to get him into place before the show ends, because obviously the shot at the end is supposed to be the 3 members of the gathering hanging, and this was all fucked up from the word go here. And, by the way, this is the match, the only match on the show that, to the best of our knowledge, did not have a bullshit run-in finish or any kind of bullshit finish at all. And we think that because we were never told or saw what happened, but we were led to believe Julio just pinned Sinn. So the only finish on this match was this.
And guess what this also is?
No idea.
The blow-off to Raven versus Shane Douglas. This is the end. because Raven transfers to Vampiro and the New Church, and Shane Douglas does something else. Presumably to get himself in better shape.
He goes to the gym.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, by the way, I gave the match, I don't know, I must have feeling generous. I gave the match a 4.5 out of 10.
3.
And like I
That's
said,
fair.
that's how the show went off the air.
God, the show was not good. Like, X Division match, if it wasn't for the X Division match, and for like 99% of it, the Daniels Jarrett match, I can't recommend anything on this show.
I still wouldn't recommend any of it because there's nothing, even that X Division match, nothing that you need to go out of the way to see. The Jarrett Daniels match was nothing special at all. You did not, there was nothing on this show you needed to see.
And that was a
And,
feud ender too, by the way.
well, I mean, kind of makes sense considering what's next. But again, it's a feud ender, but you couldn't just have Jarrett beat Christopher Daniels after, 2 months of them feuding. So overall match quality, a 3.64. Overall enjoyment, 2.0. This show was shit and made me unable to wait for Hogan to threaten to come in and so he can get rid of Russo for a few months. And then, and this may have been even more generous than any match rating I gave it, future build 4.0 out of 10. They announced 5 things for next week, and I kind of want to see 2 of them. And that gives us an overall rating of a 3.21. Good job, TNA. Good job.
Oh boy. Now we enter the month of October, and this, from what I remember on first watch, you get the moment and the what is the start of, as you said, the first reign of terror. You said the second reign of terror. I consider this the first reign of terror. Jarrett's first run was nothing. That first 7-month run.
I never implied that was the reign of terror I was talking about.
Well, the run that's coming up for Jarrett is a real reign of terror.
He and good old Power Trips are going to do their best to see who could be a bigger pain in the ass and who could cause a bigger reign of terror. But that's it for this week's exciting episode of Total Nonstop Action. So, are you still there?
I'm still here, but
okay.
only in body and not in mind or spirit or anything like that.
I'm suddenly having issues with my interweb. Alrighty. So that's gonna do it for this week. Yeah? Any video game show, something other than TNA you want to plug?
Not really. I've just been nonplussed about everything.
Fun. Well, who knows? Maybe the next 7 days will make you plussed. I don't know.
God help us all.
Anywho, that's going to do it for this week's show. Hope you all enjoyed listening to us suffer. Take care. We'll talk to you again in 7 days.
Fun fact, Ricky Vaughn was the real name of Lance Von Erich. If you know your world-class championship wrestling knowledge, you'll get a laugh.